Hi, I'm Marc Daniel Nelson here with MakeMineMusic. I wanted to talk to you about monitors. Been thinking a lot about this. So the last 6 or 7 years, I've really put a huge focus into my monitoring setup. This stems back to just trying to always achieve the best sound I can get. And you would think that translation should be just as easy as putting up a bunch of acoustic panels and great set of speakers, but it's not. I have a couple tricks I want to share, a couple pointers of that took me from getting my mixes to be comfortable to completely confident, and a couple of stories. When I first jumped into the audio jungle, gear as in preamps, microphones, and compressors, and consoles, and tape machines were my first priority. How you hear and what you hear is way more important than any transformer, preamp, any tube, any tape. It's how you hear it. I can tell you this firsthand because I ended up selling gear to get my monitor set up as clean and as thorough as I could to understand how to hear, to go back to focusing on those things. When I first bought my first set of monitors, they were Event Precision 8s. And at that time, I didn't really understand anything about critical listening and trying to understand what I was hearing. I wanted a lot of bass and I wanted a lot of power. For me, it was all about feeling the music, and I had a real bad problem mixing super, super loud. After a while, I felt, okay, something's missing. It's got to be my speakers. So I moved on and bought my next set of speakers at the time, which were the Focal Twins. Second I got them, I noticed they didn't have any of the low end that I wanted, but I noticed that my mid-range was much better. That's when I started focusing on the 3 different aspects of the mix, which is the bass, the mid-range, and the top end. And over time, I learned from people, from books, all sorts of things to kind of give me little tricks about how to best my monitors before I stepped above and got another better set. First thing I want to share is a quick trick. The most important trick. Make sure your speakers are phase accurate. Now, this is not talking about left and right speakers being in phase. Obviously, you want that. I'm talking about making sure your speakers fire forward. And a lot of people think, oh, duh, it's easy. It can be incredibly easy to make the mistake to not even realize that your speakers are even firing. I did it like a couple years ago. After the confidence of learning it, and I had all my speakers for a year or two specific, and then I worked out of a room for a while, forgot to do it, and sure enough, I was one day going and listening and like, these just aren't punchy. Something is not right. And this is before I used a Trinov or anything, which I'll talk about. And it was the speakers firing backwards first. So in phase, it's going in and out. And your speakers go backwards and forwards. And you want your speakers to fire on a kick or anything impactful. And if they go backwards, your ears are losing the sound of like what you would need to hear the impact. And you're making poor decisions based off that. Sometimes you're adding more bass. Sometimes you're adding compression. You're just not doing the correct additives. So a good way to try that and to check the phase on your speakers is to put them on their side, put a quarter right on the subwoofer or the driver, the low end driver, solo a kick drum, turn up quietly, and watch the quarter starts flicking. Invert the phase on the channel, on a plugin, whatever way the actual quarter starts getting more jumpy is obvious the way that the speaker's pushing out first. And that's just a really dummy trick to see if you're actually in. You can go get a clicker that has a phase checker on it and stuff like that. But the easiest way you can do at home with 25 cents is to put your speaker on its back, take your other speaker out of the line, inline a phase plug-in, and put a quarter on that driver. And if it jumps high versus it not really jumping, you're knowing that that's going out. Another cool trick I want to talk about real quickly before getting into other things, the S-test. And that can be done in any room you walk into. So when you're sitting down and you're in a new room and you set up your speakers, put all your panels on the wall, and you get your diffusers all lined up, and it looks really great. And then you hit play, and it just sounds weird, small, or harsh. Other things could just be the way the room is set up, the way your speakers are. Because honestly, you can move the speakers an inch, and all your bass comes. A cool trick to do with that to kind of eliminate harshness is the S test. And you can just use your S's like you would if you were like trying to find a S problem on vocals. You can hear it in a room. If there's an S issue, you know that there's going to be an issue when you're mixing because you're going to hear the issue. And you're going to end up compensating and adding more top end or less top end, depending on if there's some weird dampening in the room that's causing your S's to go away. Or the opposite, which is if there's too much S's, you're going to end up making things dull. So that's a couple cool tricks to think about when you're setting up your speakers. One last thing, the triangle effect. When I set up my speakers, I want to set them up in a triangle formation where left to right is the same space between those two to my ears in the center. And that way, it's going to move everything in a measurement-wise. It might be a little technical, but it does seem to work. Now, something also to know and to consider is I like to put my speakers roughly around 6 foot. These are midfield speakers behind me, but even like a set of NS10s or the Yamaha powered speakers, you could get away by putting 6 feet apart. And by doing that, you'll be able to hear the development of the low end better. A lot of people put their speakers right up to their head, and they're wondering why they're not getting any low end. There's no development of the low end to actually happen. So think about that when you're setting up your speakers. Let's talk about room correction and room EQ. From my land of things, I was trained and taught to not put anything in line of your speakers and to have the cleanest signal you can between your speakers and your monitor controller. Because even your monitor controller can add a sonic character that is no good. But technology is advancing and it's getting better to the point where room correction, digital room correction, for me, is actually really good. For a while there, I used the Trinov ST2, and it was a godsend. I could never have mixed in the room I was in without the thing, because what it was doing way more good than it could adding badness to the signal. It was not only EQing the signal, it was adding phase alignment, time alignment, obviously frequency correction. And on the graph, you could see what it was doing. And it's crazy because in that room, there was all these zigzags going in and out of phase, which meant that, oh yeah, my bass is in phase, but my snare drum has been out of phase this whole time. Or the vocal, some part of the vocal sounds fine. And that's phase. That's not even EQ. So you're listening to it going, wait a second, the top band of the vocal is all pointy. It could have been just because the room was set up weird. These in-ears right here, which I think a couple people have asked about, these are called SimGot. They're cheap in-ears. I only use them because I wanted to hear at the first time what a mix was doing on a crappy set of headphones, which now it used to be the Orotone, and now I think people should be focusing on the in-ears or like a Bluetooth speaker or something. These guys are pretty good. They're really aggressive in the top end, so they're really able to hear what you're trying to do. Between those two, I think I can get an idea of balance before I move up to my big ATC 45s. The other thing that I do use specifically almost every mix is this Bose Bluetooth speaker. Now this guy became my Orotone 4 or 5 years ago. Somebody came to me with mixed notes saying, I'm listening to it on my Bose surround bar sound thing, and there's not enough bass. I bought one, and I plugged it in to the mix, and he was not wrong. In my room, on my speakers, in my car, on headphones, the bass was totally fine. On the Bose speaker, because of what it was adding, there was a problem. And I ended up finding that a harmonic plugin pulled that up without touching really the speakers or the car audio. As we know, like technology now, it seems every speaker, the Alexa speakers, all these powered Bluetooth speakers have these built-in bass enhancing weird technology that just kind of AI EQ. But it's also there to help you, because a lot of the issues you have in 2020 is the competition of in-ears and Bluetooth speakers and cars that have these aggressive, digitally controlled stereo systems with subwoofers, weird subwoofers, 5 speakers, center speakers, all these weird things that are happening now in audio. So it's good to think about that. I use the ATC 45s. They're my favorite speaker. I would go up from there to another ATC larger, but I probably wouldn't come down. The mid-range on the ATCs are stunning. The bass is super tight, and I can hear it on even the LCDXs go really low. So I can hear them on that. Think about your monitoring and get your monitoring together. You're in your room. Learn your room. Trust your room. I think if you get your room set up where you're happy and you do your S's test and you do your low-end bass test and you make sure everything is set, you're going to end up getting a lot out of it. The key is to learn your room. Learn your room. Understand that every room sounds different. Understand that every room is not perfect, no matter what. And have fun. Thanks for watching.
There's no one else.